So now we've got the caravan on site, set up and level with all the corner steadies down, we can look at what energy we're going to put inside the box. There are three principal energy sources: 12 volt with an onboard battery, gas, which we'll talk about separately, and 240 volt. Now I'm going to come to 240 volt last because not all customers go on site with a mains hookup. Some customers, because it's their lifestyle, want to get away from it all and take one of our lightweight caravans, and they will never maybe use the mains input facility. I'm standing on the offside or the non-door side of the caravan simply because this is the area where most of the services come into the caravan. One of the major energy functions we want to talk about and go into quite a bit of detail is gas. As part of your PDI, pre-delivery inspection, our fully qualified engineers who are all gas safe tested will do a complete gas pressure test on your unit, including each individual appliance. For the owners, they need to know two things really. One is that each appliance has its own isolation point. So if you do ever smell gas around the oven or the grill, you can actually turn that appliance off at the gas isolation point. The other point is that each appliance inside the caravan has a dropout. This is literally a hole drilled through the floor of the caravan, normally with an anti-rodent mesh, so that mice can't get into your caravan. The principle is that LPG, or liquid petroleum gas, is heavier than air. So when you get gas, you do get a gas leak, it can go out those dropout points. It's important never to cover them up. They're there for your safety. The gas the caravan uses, as we say, is LPG, liquid petroleum gas. And it comes in two different varieties. We have the blue bottle here, which is butane, and on the caravan we're using today, we've got the red bottle, which is propane. There are differences between the temperatures that these burn at and the pressures, but I won't go into all those details. Mainly people use the red bottle because it's less likely to freeze in the winter if they're doing winter caravanning. When it does freeze, it's normally, I'm going to show you in a minute, crystallized inside the regulator. And what will happen then is you don't get gas through into your caravan just when you need it, when it's really, really cold outside. So blue and red, obviously lots of different suppliers. I'm not going to advertise the suppliers, but a lot of people do ask us, well, what's the difference between the blue and the red bottle? Either of these forms of gas will work to fire up your system. This is the inside of a gas locker box. All caravans have their own dedicated area that's not part of the living box to house gas. Sometimes, traditionally, it's on the front. Well, nearly every time it's on the front, like with this Crusader class caravan in our fleet. We can have gas also in lockers on the side on some of the smaller caravans. It's fashionable with some of the manufacturers. In all cases, you should be able to get two bottles in place, one here and one here. We're showing this just with the one bottle on and the red bottle, and I've got it turned at a little bit of an awkward angle because I want to talk about something later with this bottle. All modern caravans, from about 2008 certainly, have what we call this bulkhead regulator. All gas has to go through this from the bottle into the caravan system. Older caravans will have a regulator clipped onto the bottle, just maybe like you've got for a barbecue or one of your appliances you use at home. It's got the old regulator based on the bottle regulator. But we really want to concentrate on this, the more modern regulator. So this item here is simply a pigtail which goes from the regulator to the bottle. It's important to note that we're using this propane bottle. It has a screw-in attachment. So one of the important bits of kit you're going to need is a propane spanner. A little trick is with this, normally it's righty-tighty, not with gas bottles, it's lefty-tighty, so the thread is a different way on. There's also, on top of the bottle, which hopefully you can just see, there is a valve, which it's important that you can turn the gas off at that point. On the supply side of the regulator, there's also often a tap here, which is useful, so you can turn it off at that point. As you can see, there's two outlets on here, and you can get very fancy gas changeover units where it automatically changes from one bottle to another. I have to say, I'm not really a fan. If this bottle empties, I like to know it's empty because I can reorder another bottle and move on and manually turn it over to my second bottle. There's nothing worse when you're frying your bacon in the morning and your second bottle runs out, because then you're completely out of gas. But that's just a personal preference. Another important point about gas is that when you're towing, the gas bottles should be turned off at the valve on the bottle. Or if it's a butane blue bottle that we talked about, there's a clip-on regulator which you can turn the gas off there. Certainly if you're going on a ferry or in a channel tunnel, gas always needs to be switched off at the bottle. A little tip about changing a gas bottle. Obviously it's something that you'll have to do as a customer with the gas spanner as we've shown you, or if it's butane, the clip-on regulator. Always turn your gas off. Even though you think the bottle's empty, there will be a residual amount in there that will always fluff out of you, and it's not very pleasant. So turn the bottle off. But the other thing to remember is that you've maybe let a little bit of air into the system, so that when you come to use your gas, a good tip is to go to the caravan kitchen hob and light one of the burners, and you maybe hear some air come through before it automatically lights, and then just run that for a few seconds. That means that the gas has come through into the caravan, and more sensitive pieces of equipment like your fridge or your water heater will get gas straight away so that they can ignite. We mentioned earlier about gas isolation valves. This particular isolation valve has the snowflake symbol on it, and it's situated relatively close to the fridge. Each appliance, as we say, will have its own isolation valve, and it's important to know, for you to know, where they are in the caravan. All current caravans built for the UK market will have this dedicated battery box for 12-volt electrics. Batteries come in all shapes and forms. This type of battery, the longer the battery is, the more power it's got, is a 120 amp battery, which is adequate for the heavier duty uses of the battery, such as a motor mover. 12 volt, as I think I've already mentioned, is a really vital source of power. Most of the units inside and the appliances, although they're dual fuel, working on gas and mains, they do rely on 12 volt for their brain. So we do need 12 volt in the caravan. The other thing to note is that when you buy a caravan, very rarely a battery comes with it. It's something you need to add to your accessories in all its forms, from either a 75 amp or 120 amp, obviously, if you're using a lot of power. The reason the caravan doesn't come as standard with a battery is because, obviously, plugged into the mains, it will fire up a transformer which steps to 40 volt down to 12 volt, and it will run like this, but we don't recommend it. We think you do need a battery even if you're going to be using your caravan on mains. The reason for this is that the 12 volts, there's so many 12 volt functions inside the caravan, including your pump when you're having a shower and everything else. The transformer can be stressed if it's got all those 12 volt outputs and it's having to handle it. So a battery is always a useful backup point. And the other thing is, you never know when you're going to get a power cut. A battery will then cut in and work all your 12 volt functions. So going back to what we talked about with different customers using caravans in different ways, some people like to do what we call wild camping. They don't want to rely on a mains hookup. And the major thing is about a caravan, a modern caravan, it will all work on 12 volt and gas. So you can be quite sufficient in a sheep field. The only thing you've got to worry about is that is a finite amount of energy you've got with that 12 volt battery. And your holiday will last as long as the battery lasts. There are ways to put energy into that battery to top it up. A lot of our caravans come nowadays with a solar panel, and certainly if the caravan that you've purchased hasn't got one and it's something you want, it's something that our technicians can fit. The other way of putting energy into the caravan obviously is with a petrol generator. These aren't so popular on sites because they're quite noisy, but it is another way of doing that. We always say that if you start your holiday with a good battery, you'll end your holiday with a good battery, especially if you've got mains input on the site topping it up. The charger inside or the transformer inside will trickle charge your battery, but it won't fully charge a battery up. In other words, it won't take a flat battery and charge it. It's asking too much of the transformer. In this case, it's good practice to take the battery off and charge it up. A little tip is, if you do take the battery off, please make sure that the master switch, the 12 volt master switch, which we're going to be showing you later on, is switched off, and that obviously the caravan's not plugged into mains. If it's plugged into mains or the master switch is on, it can cause surges and it can cause fuses to blow, which is only going to lead to problems when you're setting up. Before we talk about plugging the caravan into 240 volt, as we've said, it's always good practice to set the caravan up on gas and 12 volt. And there's good reasons for this, which I'll come to later. This is a classic piece of caravanning equipment, an Aqua Roll, and I have to stress it's something else as well that doesn't come as standard with a caravan. It's something you have to buy as an accessory. A fantastic design, whoever designed it many years ago, because you've actually got a handle and you can roll it to the tap, fill it up and roll it back. And anybody who knows if you're trying to carry 5 kgs of water, how heavy that is, that's cut out a lot of messing about when you're trying to get water to the caravan. So with that Aqua Roll full, roll from the tap, positioned in its position where it is now, all caravans, or most caravans nowadays, come with this bit of equipment. It's called a submersible pump, and it works on 12 volt. So we've got the pumpy end, which submerses in the water, and then we've got this end which plugs into the caravan. So I'll just show you that, dropping the pump into the water, push that into place. Normally there's a flat, this is a whale system, but there are different systems, but they'll all work on the same principle. There's either some lugs or there's a flap which pushes down. And what that's done is lock that in there so when the pressure builds up it doesn't fly out. So that's in its position, ready to give water inside the caravan. When it comes to accessories, the Aqua Roll is a real friend when you're on site, because you're going to need to get water into the caravan. And one of its features, as you can see on this side, just looking here, wobbling around, looking here, is a cap. You can buy an attachment to screw in there, which is like a stopcock, which means that you can attach that. If you're on a site with its own dedicated tap, you can attach that to the tap, turn the tap on, and you've got constant water then here at your Aqua Roll. The other gizmo that's available from our accessory shop is an even lazier piece of equipment, because it plugs onto the caravan tap and comes directly into the caravan via this plug. It has its own plug. Now it's important to note that the plug that comes with is a pressure reducer. In other words, it will reduce the pressure from domestic pressure to the caravan pressure. Never just try and rig something up where you're going straight into the caravan with a hose pipe, because it will corrupt the joints and everything else in the caravan, which is at a different pressure to your normal 3-bar domestic pressure you've got at home. Inside the caravan, normally on the 12 volt distribution centre, is a dedicated area for your pump. This one, in particular, this Crusader class caravan, has an on-off switch or a master switch for the pump. Now quite often this one's set in the naught position so that we can use water in the caravan. This is coming straight from that Aqua Roll we've just plugged in. In the 2 position, it's a dedicated position because this caravan has an onboard water tank, which we'll talk about later. And obviously the internal is to use the water from the onboard water tank. So we're on that center position, which means we're working direct from the Aqua Roll outside. And you'll notice nothing happens. There is at the top here a pump run switch. When I turn, I'll just do it now, I'll put the tap on. We notice that that switch, that light comes on. That means your pump is running. So with the 12 volt master switch switched on to the pump and making sure that obviously all that's in place, we come to the taps themselves. It's important when you first come into the caravan to run the hot water through. Turn the tap to hot and run it through. These caravans rely on a pressure system predominantly now, which means that when you actually open the tap like that, it is denoting a drop in pressure, and a pressure switch is activating your 12 volt pump outside that we saw earlier on we put in the Aqua Roll. This means that there may be a slight delay from switching on and it switching off, because obviously it has to build up a pressure, and you'll notice that the green light we've just shown you on the indication board may stay on for a few seconds after you've switched your pump off. Now the main reason why we haven't plugged 240 volt in at this stage is because by turning that tap on with the hot water, it will fill up the hot water boiler first, the kettle as it were, first. We all know what happens at home if we plug the kettle in without any water in it. It will blow the element, it can do danger. So this is why it's good practice to set up with 12 volt and gas first. As we've said, this is a modern caravan with a pressure switch system. Some of the older caravans we sell have still got the micro switch system. Now basically this does the same in principle, switches the pump on, but each tap outlet is a switch, and when you put it on with a micro switch system, you'll hear a distinctive click as it comes into play, and that just sends a warning straight down to the pump to switch itself on, and there'll be a micro switch on the hot cold for all the taps and the shower in the caravan. But the same, we're getting this less and less, but it still does exist. In some of the more up-spec models of caravans, you've got an onboard water tank. Now this is an alternative supply to your Aqua Roll, but it still needs the Aqua Roll outside. You can fill this from the Aqua Roll outside by selecting a position on the pump master switch, which we've just shown you. What are the advantages of having an onboard water tank? Most people would ask that. Well, you've got water inside the caravan, so if you're winter caravanning, your water's not going to freeze. The other thing is that this will act as an addition to your Aqua Roll. In other words, in some cases, this has got a reed switch in the top and a reed switch in the bottom, so it'll tell you when, as soon as it gets down to its minimum, if you've got 40 litres of water outside in your Aqua Roll, it'll automatically fill from that, effectively giving you 80 litres of water. Don't worry about overfilling it either. You can't overfill it, it will cut the pump off with a switch at the top automatically. Interestingly, while we're under here, we talked about pressure switch systems. This unit here is a whale pressure switch system, which our technicians will show you how to adjust. This adjusts the time that it takes. As we said, when you switch the tap off, the light stays on, or annoyingly, if you switch the tap on and it takes several seconds for the water to come out, we can adjust that on that pressure switch system. There's also, in this corner, very importantly, a jettison point. In other words, a point that will empty the onboard water tank out underneath the caravan to empty it out for, which we'll come to later, fully winterizing, or when you're traveling along. It isn't really recommended to have water in this tank as you're traveling. As you can imagine, if you fill that tank up, you're adding a lot of weight to your caravan, in this case right at the back end of the unit, which won't help your tow. With the water system in a caravan, as we've already noted with the onboard water tank, there is that jettison point or outlet point to drain the water off. When we're putting our caravan down for the winter or putting it into storage and we're going to get freezing weather, frost can really do a great deal of damage to the plumbing system of a caravan and the taps. So we really need to attend to being able to drain the whole system down. There'll be a drain valve on the hot water, the combi hot water system, or if you've got a caravan with a separate heater and water system, obviously on the water system, there are jettison points, drain valves, which our engineers will show you on the day. It is important that we get all the water drained down. The other thing that's really vital is that you open up, make sure the master switch is switched off and the pump's switched off. You open up all the taps. This reduces the vacuum in the pipes and lets it drain naturally. You can even buy a foot pump gizmo that you plug in where we plug the pump in, and you actually pump the air out, with obviously the taps open, pump the air out. You'll be amazed that if you've got a minute piece of water in one of the taps, you can get frost damage. You will get frost damage if we get temperatures of sort of minus 8, 9, 10. It will jump through the skin of a caravan and create havoc on your water systems. So where does all that water go that you're using, that you're putting down the sinks or the shower? It's called grey water, and it comes out of 2 points in the side of your caravan, here and here, and into a waste master. It's a bit of a no-no just to let this drain on the floor. You'll have a warden on the campsite telling you off, although I'm sure it would be good for the grass. But we recommend one of these. It's a waste master. You can't see most of this because it's pointed underneath the caravan. Basically, you're plugging these sockets on with this 28mm convoluted hose into the waste master, and obviously when that's full it'll need emptying down a point that will be specified on the caravan site, normally near the toilet block. You can buy these Y pieces and these kits from our accessory shop, which means that you can join those two into one to make it easier to feed into this waste master. The waste master also rather nicely has wheels on the end of it, so you can trundle it along. Again, you're not carrying that weight of water, because I understand that this is a 40-litre capacity as well. So that's where your grey water goes. And so we come to a system that's maybe the most popular way of getting power into the caravan and the most commonly used, and that's a mains input. So we've got a 25-metre lead, which is normally, we recommend a 25-metre lead. You can get away with a 10-metre, but certainly if you've got a 25-metre in your kit, it'll get from the site post to the caravan quite comfortably. Once this is plugged in, you've got mains into your caravan, and that'll also activate that transformer we talked about later on and feed the 12-volt transformer system, as well as topping up your battery, as we've explained. This is the piece simply that plugs into the mains point on the site. If you want to use your mains lead at home, you can use one of these very handy adapters. It plugs into there, and you can plug that into a 13-pin point at home, so that obviously you can have mains on if you've got your caravan on the drive. As well as the UK adapter for plugging into a 13-amp output at home, there's also a very useful piece of kit which goes on the end of your site post mains hookup lead if you're travelling on the continent or wanting to use electricity on the continent, which obviously has this point on the end, and on this end it's got the 2-point pin to go into the electric supply for continental use. Most of the sites in Europe, you'll need that. The end of your mains hookup lead, which goes into the caravan, has got this spring-loaded flap on it. Now this is quite important, not only to stop damp getting into there, but when we plug it in, this is always on the top, we plug it in, that's got a little tooth on it which locks it into place. Now, it's important you know that and the function of that, because when you come to unplug that, you obviously need to release this flap before you pull it out. Don't just yank it out, because you can do damage obviously to the socket behind it, and I've even seen customers who've pulled that out completely because they've forgotten that that's got a tooth on it and it is locking it into place. With the mains lead in, because there's a little gap here specifically for it, we can actually shut and lock that locker with the lead in place. I'll just remind customers that if you're booking a site or a pitch, you must obviously make sure you're booking it with a mains output point. You're paying for that mains, so most customers would say, well, if we're paying for the mains, we may as well use it and use all the functions on mains. There is a slight warning there that obviously to limit the amount of use of electricity on the site, they do downgrade the ampage of the site post. So you can have a situation if you've got your 3 kilowatt heating element on, you've got your fridge on mains, you've got your television on, all your 240 volt functions, you can trip that point. Certainly you'll trip that point if you use a quick boil kettle from home, for instance. It's notorious because it can be 1200 watts or even more at being a quick boil kettle. You can buy from our accessory shop slow boil or 240 volt kettles which won't trip the point. They're a low wattage kettle. The other thing, the other item that the ladies often bring with them is a hairdryer with booster on it. That can also trip the point. So just be aware there is a finite amount of ampage coming into your caravan when you're on a site post. The caravan consumer unit is much the same as the one you've got at home, with a range of fuses for each circuit. There is a main trip switch or RCD that protects the system. This can be tested, but be aware it will trip the supply circuit where your caravan is plugged into, either at home or on the site post. While we're in this area, the caravan also has a bank of 12 volt fuses for all the 12 volt circuits in the caravan. It's always important to know where these are situated if you need to isolate or trace a fault. But if you're not sure, always contact a qualified electrician.